Hello YouTube and welcome back to a new video with Rams Fan YT. We are going to go through my weekly predictions today. There's a lot of them, so we're going to just dive straight into them with Middlesbrough versus Ipswich on tonight in the Championship. Middlesbrough have had an absolutely flying start to the season, that cannot be denied. But they did lose their last game, and maybe the international break did come at the wrong time for them. Ipswich, meanwhile, before the international break, were gradually building together quite a healthy run of form, being 5 games unbeaten, and they'll look to carry on in an attempt to make an immediate return to the Premier League. I think this one tonight is going to go the way of the Tractor Boys. 2-0 to Ipswich. Simple as you like. Onto the Premier League, we've had Nottingham Forest versus Chelsea, which is already being dubbed as a must-win game for Nottingham Forest if Ange Postecoglou wants to keep his job. Chelsea, not as strong as they were last season, but they're still in that top echelons, competing in and around the Champions League competing spaces. They are currently 7th, only 3 points, though, off that 4th place with a superior goal difference. I think this one will be relatively easy for Chelsea. I'm going to go with a 1-0 win. I just think that Forest will have to try and at least defend in this game, which Ange isn't very well known for. Brighton Hove Albion versus Newcastle United. Currently, 2 of the most mid-table sides in the Premier League, with both having 2 wins, 3 draws and 2 losses. I think it's going to be a very even game, in all honesty. A 1-1 draw at the Amex. Burnley versus Leeds United. Lancashire versus Yorkshire. Already, potentially, Burnley are looking in danger of being in a relegation battle. Leeds, similar sort of story. They've not been as bad, but I think both of these 2 teams could end up struggling as the season goes on. In this one, I think it'll be quite a cagey, low-scoring game. I'm going to go a 0-0 draw. Crystal Palace versus Bournemouth. We always love talking about positivity, and these are 2 teams which well and truly are one of the most positive lights in the Premier League at the moment. Both have only lost once. Both are currently in the top 6, looking to get a European position. Palace to do one better than they did last season with their misjustice of their FA Cup, not allowing them into the Europa League. But they won't really care. They're in Europe now. So they've got that balancing act to do. Bournemouth faded away coming into the season, but I do think Areola is a fantastic manager, and I would not be surprised if one of the big dogs in Europe start sniffing around him sooner rather than later. In this one, I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw. I just can't pick a winner between the 2. Manchester City versus Everton. Manchester City have gone unbeaten in the last 4, having had a pretty mediocre start to the season, which saw them floating in around the mid-table. Nowadays, they are looking as if they can go and take on the league and maybe even get into the challenge into the title again. It's an interesting one, this one, because Everton are equally quite good at the moment. David Moyes has done a fantastic job turning this side around and becoming competitive once again. That new home ground is clearly not having an impact at all in terms of a negative one. If anything, it's more of a positive one. But this one's at the Etihad, and I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in this one. Sunderland versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. You have to take your hat off to Sunderland for the way they've gone about things so far. It's not been pretty, right? It's not there, but they never were going to be. They're very low scoring, but defensively, they're one of the best defensive teams in the league. And seemingly they're up against a Wolves side who has yet to win a game. You're going to have to go with Sunderland to win this one at the Stadium of Light. 3-0 to the Black Cats. Fulham versus Arsenal. Fulham have lost the last couple of games, and Arsenal are currently top of the league, believe it or not. They won't probably stay there, in all honesty. I think this could be quite an even game. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. We're going a lot of draws in today's video, I can tell you that. Oxford United versus Derby County. We've got an early kickoff as we travel to the Kassam Stadium. Good news coming from Oxford this week is that it's looking more than likely that their new stadium is going to get the green light and the go-ahead, as the Secretary of State has said that he would not interfere with the planning permission because it is going to be done on the green belt. On the pitch, however, Oxford have not looked as delightful as the news may have been. They're currently in the relegation zone, and Gary Rowett is struggling to score goals. Not as much as some teams, but he just can't. He's lost a few. Derby are in a ridiculous position. Joint with Southampton have a most amount of draws in the Championship at 5. We just can't win a game at the moment. And accordingly, I think it will be a 1-1 draw. A lot of people are getting a bit impatient about Eustace, but I think as long as we're not losing games, I'm not got particularly an issue. Because I think we do have a team that we can turn it around. Draws for me is fine at this stage of the season because it doesn't take much to turn a draw into a win. However, if we were losing every week, that is much more to be able to turn it around to get a win in the next week because you have to pick up a lot more momentum. Queen's Park Rangers versus Millwall in a bit of a London derby, and also a competition really for the playoffs at the moment. 1 point separating these two teams, which have had quite a good start. QPR are unbeaten in quite a fair few games now, at least 6. Whereas Millwall have had a bit more of a uncertain time of late. Millwall are better defensively. Queen's Park Rangers are better offensively. Overall, I think they're roughly the same. We're going to go with a 1-1 draw in this one at Loftus Road. Not Loftus Road. I'm just tripping. Did I just say Loftus Road for Queen's Park Rangers with full confidence? Yes, it is. For some reason, I just suddenly had a thought that it was Luton's for some reason. No, it is Queen's Park Rangers. I was in autopilot, and my autopilot proved correct. Southampton versus Swansea. Yes, Swansea is an odd one altogether. They are very mid-table. They've got 3 wins, 3 draws, 3 losses. So about 3-3-3 in their opening 9. Couldn't really place them. Whereas Southampton have had a few too many draws. And I do think sooner rather than later, a team of the quality of Southampton will start picking up wins. And I think they will start here at St Mary's at home to Swansea, winning this one by 3-0. Birmingham City versus Hull City. Yeah, Birmingham are not flying as was suspected that they would have been at the start of the season. I'm not overly too surprised in this regard. Purely by the basis, I think there was a little bit too much hype and pressure applied onto them. But they are up against a Hull side, which you can't place your finger on too much. They both have that 333 next to their name, but Hull's defence is something else. Birmingham can't score, Hull can't defend. And accordingly, we're going to go with a 2-1 win to Birmingham City at home at St Andrews. Charlton Athletic versus Sheffield Wednesday. I'm going to look like an idiot again, but I just feasibly can't see Sheffield Wednesday losing every single game like some are predicting, right? They're going to win occasionally. Against a mid-table side like Charlton, it could be very much realistic. Charlton don't score a lot of goals. Sheffield Wednesday do concede a lot, mind you. They've already conceded 20 in the 9 games. They've got a bit of an excuse for that. But I just think a scrappy 1-0 win for Sheffield Wednesday is all they're going to get. It won't be pretty, but if you can scrap a 3 points, then, you know, they do say sometimes that adversity does bring you together. Coventry City versus Blackburn Rovers. Blackburn are really sort of had a bit of a fall off from last season. A bit of a predictable one, mind you. Whereas Coventry, strength to strength, currently unbeaten. But no one is looking like they're stopping them at the moment. Scoring 27 goals, only conceding 7. Absolute fantastic. They are leagues above everyone else in the Championship at the moment. The Sky Blues, led by Frank Lampard, we're going to go with a 3-0 win at the CBS Arena. I just can't see Blackburn getting anything from this game. Norwich City versus Bristol City. Well, yes, Liam Manning left Bristol City at the start of the season to join Norwich City, and ironically enough, Bristol City are above Norwich City. So it proved it wasn't just a Liam Manning effect. Gerard Struber does know what he's doing after all, and I do think that Struber's men come away with a win in this one. Yeah, Norwich are certainly struggling a lot more than I think a lot of people were expecting with an appointment like Manning. I'm going to go with a 2-0 win for Bristol City. Sheffield United versus Watford. Sheffield United did bring in Chris Wilder. He's taken a little bit of time to get back to being in the managerial hot seat, but up against a unpredictable weather vane of Watford, who have somehow sacked their manager within 9 games. I don't even know at this point, is anyone surprised, right? There's 3 certainties to life: taxes, death, and Watford sacking their manager before November. They have brought in a Javi Garcia over the international break. Not convinced on this one. He did manage Watford back in 2018-19, if you remember. He did manage to keep them up in the Premier League and also took them to the final of the FA Cup. So he has got a bit of pedigree with the Hornets. But since then, I wouldn't say that he really... I wouldn't say he's a man at the moment that would take them on to that next level. So I'm going to say Sheffield United to win this one. It certainly will take a bit of time for Javi Garcia to come back as well. 1-0 to the Blades. Only a solitary goal in it. Stoke City versus Wrexham. Stoke started the season very well. They've slightly fallen off of it since then. Defensively, still very solid. They just can't score a goal, and they've drawn the last 3. But up against the Wrexham side, who have also drawn the last 3 games, but they're finding that being the Hollywood name isn't actually helping their cause in any way at the moment, as teams aren't as bothered in the Championship about that glamour and actually just playing them like a normal team. And suddenly Wrexham have found themselves not as strong as they were, so they're going to have to adapt. Phil Parkinson's men. But I think in this one, 3-1 to Stoke City, I think it's a very obvious win for the Potters. West Bromwich Albion versus Preston North End. Both of these teams have started the season very well. Preston, I'm really surprised, have started as well as they have done. I mean, if you're a Preston fan, do let me know, how have you turned this round? And I don't think realistically even the Preston fans expected this to be the case, this sort of level of turnaround. And therefore, I do think there will be a point that they've got a glass ceiling and they will start floating back down the table. I think this may start here at the Hawthorns. 3-1 to West Bromwich Albion. Leicester City versus Portsmouth. Leicester are unbeaten in a lot of games now. However, they've had 4 draws in the last 5 games. So it's not as winning sailing as one may think. And up against a Pompey side, which you can never quite be certain who's going to turn up. They're not very high scorers, but they don't concede a lot either. I think we're going to see a 1-1 draw here at the King Power Stadium. Burton Albion versus Peterborough United. A proper relegation 6-pointer, so to speak, on this one. At the moment, Peterborough are at the bottom of the table. It's not particularly pleasant reading overall. Burton have managed to get themselves out of the relegation mire for now with a very good 3-0 win. Was it against Huddersfield, I believe, in their last game? They are a side that I think will probably just be able to scrape it. But at the moment, I think there are a couple of sides who could potentially cause a bit of danger to them. Reading and Rotherham are the 2 on my current list who are thinking they could leapfrog over Burton and put them back in the relegation zone. However, in this one, I think it'll be very tense, very competitive. There's a lot of goals conceded in Peterborough and not a lot of goals scored by them. But we'll go with a 2-2 draw in this one. Burton have clearly found their firepower, but have they managed to retain some of their defensive abilities? Lincoln City versus Stevenage. Both of these are phenomenally flying dark horses at the moment. Stevenage are unbeaten in the last 5. Lincoln have somehow managed to get themselves in the playoffs. This is a proper sort of 2 hero stories and 2 sides that I would love to see be promoted, because, we don't really want to just constantly see the Cardiffs of this world getting back up and, something different, give it some change. I think we're going to see a 0-0 draw at Sinsel Bank on the basis that I think both of these sides are 2 very good sides and they don't concede a lot. Blackpool versus Wickham, another relegation 6-pointer. Blackpool have now sacked, I believe, Steve Bruce eventually. Or maybe not me eventually, but they brought in, they haven't got a permanent manager, they've still got interim managers. I would have thought the international break would have been a good time to do that. Wickham are also a side who have they parted company with their manager? Yes, they did, and they brought in Michael Duff, didn't they? And I think that was a good call to make by Wickham, and I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw though. I can't edge out either of these sides in this at the moment. I think both are not at their greatest at the moment. Bradford City versus Barnsley, a all Yorkshire affair in this one, and Bradford are absolutely flying. Let's give some credit. Scored 20 goals in 11 games, conceded 13. But I think you're looking at Bradford at the moment. They are a side that, scoring-wise, I think they can very much hold their own up there. It's their defence is not quite as good as Cardiff's, so that may hold them back a bit. But we know how well they can perform, and I think this is going to be a goals galore game in this one against a Barnsley side who, yes, are competitive but haven't won in the last 3 games. 5-1 to Bradford City as they're continuing their great run of form. Cardiff City versus Reading. Yeah, I mean, it's an obvious win for Cardiff, isn't it? I know Reading are unbeaten in the last 4, but they're still in the relegation zone, and Cardiff are a side that most of the bookies will probably have to win the title at this point even. They've scored 19, only conceded 9. I think they're one of the best teams in League One at the moment. Yeah, 1-0 to Cardiff. I don't think it will be an easy game, but I just can't see Cardiff losing or even dropping points in this one. Doncaster Rovers versus Northampton Town. Doncaster on a bit of a stinky run of form of late, having not won in the last 5 games compared to their excellent start of the season that they did have. Northampton had a really good run of form until the last couple of games. They've not won in the last couple. I don't want to say the wheels have come off as say, but they just can't score goals. They've scored 8 goals, which the only other teams who've scored that little goals is currently Peterborough United, which is sitting bottom of the table. The fact is that they've only conceded 10, which is the joint 3rd best in the league with Lincoln, is some consolation for them. But they need to start scoring Northampton, otherwise they will start drifting down. And I think in this one, Northampton does win. 2-0 to Northampton Town. Luton Town versus Mansfield Town. 2 quite mid-table sides at the moment on 16 and 15 points respectively after 11 games they've played. It's a difficult one to go. I think it could go either way. I'm going to go home advantage to Kenilworth Road at Luton Town. 2-1 to Luton Town and the Hatters. I think they are far more likely to be a side competing towards the playoffs. But at the moment, they're looking, if anything, a mid-table side. Maybe they needed that season of adjustment. Who knows? Plymouth Argyle versus AFC Wimbledon. AFC Wimbledon, almost a 5-star base performance week in, week out over the last few weeks, haven't they? It's unbeaten in the last 5. They've won 4 games during that time. They have been fantastic. Up against a Plymouth side, which are far from it, conceding 19 goals. It's not a pretty picture to be reading, because on goals conceded, they would be in the relegation zone. They have scored slightly more goals than a lot of the other teams in their position at the moment. And I think this could be a very end-to-end game at Home Park, which we know is a difficult place to go. End-to-end 3-3 draw. Rotherham United versus Leyton Orient. Leyton Orient did finally get a win to end their barrenless 4-game streak without a win in their last game. But they're up against a Rotherham side who will be chomping at that bit to be able to get out relegation zone. And they did win their last game. And I do think this could provide a bit of a turning point. 1-0 to Rotherham United at the New York Stadium. I think realistically, if they could just win a few more of their games, I know it's a simple statement. That's really non-statement, if anything. But if they could just turn some of their losses into points, then they would actually be a decent enough side. But unfortunately, at the moment, they're in a relegation zone because they've just not been good enough. Stockport County versus Exeter City. Exeter did end their losing streak in the last couple of games. They've picked up 4 points in the last 2 games. Will that be enough up against the Stockport County side, which are unbeaten in the last 5? I do not think so. Stockport are certainly a side that you would consider to be in the playoff picture at the moment. 2-0 to Stockport County at Edgeley Park. I can't see Exeter providing much of a challenge to them. Wigan Athletic versus Port Vale. Wigan in 17th, Port Vale in 15th. Although Port Vale are unbeaten in the last 5, and I do think they extend their unbeaten run, but I do think it will be a draw because I don't think Port Vale are very free-flowing in terms of their scoring. They're just very good defensively. A 0-0 draw in this one at the DW Stadium. On to League 2, we've got Cambridge United versus Bromley. The 2 teams that are only 2 points off the playoffs at the moment, but just aren't consistent enough to look anywhere near capable of reaching that playoff position at present. I think, if anything, Bromley is looking slightly more capable. That's purely on the basis that they've scored a few more goals. But they do also concede a few more goals as well. We're going to have a very even 3-3 draw in this one. I couldn't tell you, if I tried, which one would come out as winners in this. Salford City versus Oldham Athletic, a bit of a Greater Manchester derby. Salford have lost the last 3, but before that were absolutely great and looking playoff standard. They are up against an Oldham side who haven't won in the last 3 as well. I would have to say that Salford get back to winning ways at the Peninsula Stadium here. 2-0 to the Ammies. Accrington Stanley versus Swindon Town. Swindon, incredible performances of late. I think they've been one of them. They're obviously in the top 3, and I think they have proven themselves to be in that top 3 picture. They've yet to draw a game, interestingly. They've won 8 and lost 3, but have played a game less than almost everyone else in the top half. Actually, everyone else in the top half. So, winning their game in hand, and they're top of the league, by the way. So, let's give some credit, because I don't think anyone really expected Swindon to be like that. Accrington Stanley have had a bit of a poor season so far, and I think maybe it'll be one of them shock results. You occasionally do see them in League 2. A 2-2 draw at the Wham Stadium. I couldn't really... Most people will probably be going with Swindon as an easy win on this one. I'm just not so convinced. Barnet versus Notts County. Notts County are a very enigmatic team. They've won 5, drawn 2, and lost 4. They've scored 20 goals, conceded 13. On the basis of how good they play in the games that they're at their peak, they should be in the playoffs, but they've just not managed to reach that consistent levels throughout the season. You know, that's why they're currently mid-table. But I would say that they would be in the playoffs. Martin Patterson clearly needs to form some sort of consistency. I wasn't too sure on his appointment, and that could come true because I do think Barnet take a point in this one because they have been unbeaten in the last 5. Really solid team and looking playoff quality. I think, did I say that Barnet might reach the playoffs? I think I did. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in this one. Bristol Rovers versus Tranmere Rovers. Bristol Rovers have lost the last couple of games. Before that were excellent. Not so much in defence. They've been a bit poor in defence or in attack. But I think they had a consistency, which just meant that they ground out a few results. But Tranmere have not won a game in a very long time now. They've had 3 draws in their last 6 games and 3 losses. In all honesty, I think this one will be a draw because I think they concede the same amount of goals, but actually Tranmere score more. And I think it could be a 2-2 draw. Chesterfield versus Fleetwood. Fleetwood would be a playoff side if they could actually hold on to leads, defend a bit better. And they're a bit uncertain at the moment. Chesterfield is a really wild team. They've scored 22 and conceded 19. Defensively, they would be like, I don't know, in the bottom 5 or so. Offensively, they would be in the top 4. So maybe even top 3. So you can't really predict which Chesterfield side is going to turn up on the day. I think at home they're going to win. If it was at Fleetwood, I may have said something else. But for this one, I'm going to go Spyrights to win 3-0. I just wish this Derbyshire side that I love to support Derbyshire side would just stop being a thorn in the flipping side to me, because the lack of consistency is driving me insane. I'm seeing like occasionally a 6-2 against a Colchester, or it's like in the EFL Trophy was like 7-1 versus Crewe. I mean, an absolutely great performance for next week. It's bizarre, to say the least. Colchester United versus Harrogate Town. Talking about Colchester, they're up against Harrogate. Colchester have won the last 2 and Harrogate lost the last 2. But I think overall these 2 teams are very equal. They've conceded the same amount as 17. Harrogate haven't scored as many, but I think maybe nick a result in this one. A 1-0 win for the Sulphurites. On to the next one. Grimsby Town versus Gillingham. 5th place Grimsby versus 3rd place Gillingham. 1 point separating them. Grimsby the superior goal difference because they've scored more goals than Gillingham but have conceded more. It'll be a fascinating game. Whoever wins this are putting themselves in a prime position to target the automatics throughout the season. However, at Rundle Park, I don't think either one will get all the honours. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. Milton Keynes Dons versus Crewe Alexandra. 3 wins on the spin for MK Dons up against a Crewe side that a little bit more consistency and firepower in front of goal would definitely put them firmly in that playoff position. But a bit like Chesterfield in some senses, other senses not, but they're both sides that have off days and on days, and I couldn't tell you which one of these on days or off days will result in them getting the playoffs at the end of the season, because I think between the 2 of them, maybe even Bromley in there as well, I could see any of them feasibly getting that 7th place spot. I know Chesterfield are currently 6th, but this is an interesting one. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw at the MK Stadium. It does extend the MK Dons unbeaten run, and I think it gives Crewe a 2nd draw of the season. But I don't think that will be enough to be able to get them into the playoffs yet. Newport County versus Cheltenham Town. A proper 6-pointer at the bottom of the table. Both of these have been horrendous so far. 8 points apiece in their 12 games. It's less than a point a game. 11 goals for Newport, 7 goals for Cheltenham. Newport have conceded 21. Cheltenham have conceded 25. Both of these sides are deserving of being in relegation zone. Although I would say that Newport are potentially more likely to get out of it, purely on the basis that they can actually score a few compared to teams like Accrington Stanley and Shrewsbury at the moment, and even Crawley. They've outscored all of them. And they did win their last game. They both had recently ended a bit of a poor run of form. I'm going to go Cheltenham, though, because they've picked up 4 points in the last 2 games. We're going to go with a hefty win, actually, at Wadden Road. Sorry, it's Rodney Parade, isn't it? But for Cheltenham, 3-0 to Cheltenham Town. I think this is going to be a much more competitive relegation battle than we had last season. It's already looking like it. I think there's at least 4 teams, maybe even 5 teams. You could maybe even go as high as Tranmere to throw into that mix at the moment for them 2 relegation spaces. Shrewsbury Town versus Crawley Town, another one of them relegation 6-pointers that I was referring to earlier. 21 goals conceded from Crawley, 20 goals conceded from Shrewsbury. Both horrendous and both can't score. They're basically identically as bad as each other at this stage. I'm just going to edge out Crawley because I do think Shrewsbury get relegated come the end of the season. 2-1 to Crawley Town. Walsall versus Barrow. I know Barrow are unbeaten in the last 4, but Walsall have been flipping immense, haven't they? They're just a whole nother level. They're at the top of the table. Not necessarily on statistics looking the best, but on points gained, you can't complain about that one. And I think Walsall take all 3 points here at the best Scott. 1-0 to Walsall. Solihull Moors versus Braintree Town in the next one in the National League. We go. And Solihull have been inspired since their managerial change. They have brought in Matt Sadler, I believe. They sacked Matt Sadler and brought in Chris Millington. It's been a long week. And Chris Millington, I think, did a really good job when he was at SC Halifax Town. He won the FA Trophy with them, regularly got into the playoffs with them. A very good appointment, I must say so. Up against a Braintree side that are in relegation zone, have drawn the last couple of games. It's hard to tell whether throughout the season that they're going to be in this relegation zone because you can never quite tell with Braintree. They're like the Burton Albion of the National League of late. They've been just above that relegation zone season in, season out, managing to hold on. So I'm not going to count my chickens at the moment. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw at Damson Park. On to Aldershot Town versus Tamworth. Another team that seemed to normally perpetually finish just above that relegation zone is Aldershot Town, who, unfortunately, Tommy Widdrington has resigned. I think this was more due to their health rather than the performances on the pitch. He had 2 strokes recently, and my thoughts are with him, and I hope he gets back to health as quickly as possible because he did a fantastic job with Aldershot, didn't he? He got them the FA Trophy, was it last season? Yes, the FA Trophy last season. So certainly wasn't a bad manager by any lengths. I don't know whether the interim manager will just continue it. I think it's Dawson. Will continue his legacy and style of play, but they've got a difficult game for that new man in the job, as Tamworth have been unbeaten in a lot of games now. They've gone 6 wins, 4 draws, but 4 losses in it. I think scoring a few more and conceding a bit less, I know it's a bit of a cliche, will help Tamworth phenomenally. And there's been so many range of games, by the way. There's been like some teams who've only played 12, some which have only played 13, some which played 14. So it's hard to predict the table at present. But I think in this one, we're going to see a 2-2 draw. We've had a few draws of late at Tamworth, and I think it's going to be another one. Altrincham versus Woking. Back down to this bottom end of the table. We're doing a lot of them early on. Altrincham in 18th. Altrincham in 20th, Woking in 18th. Alty have been slightly poorer. Both have only scored 17, so it's not the goal scoring which is the issue, but it's for conceding. Woking conceding 19 and Altrincham conceding 22, which has ultimately meant that they are in a bit of danger. I'm going to go Altrincham to win this one by 1-0, which will mark a change as because they've been losing a lot recently. They have stuck with Phil Parkinson, which is a risky move. I probably wouldn't have at this point, because I don't think Altrincham should be anywhere near the relegation zone with the abilities they have. But yeah, that's what they've opted to do, and I think they could get a win in this one. Boreham Wood versus Eastleigh. Yeah, Eastleigh unbeaten in the last 4. Boreham Wood are phenomenal of late. Let's not take anything away. Who here really thought that Boreham Wood was going to be in the playoffs at this stage of the season? Having been promoted last season, that have really provided a bit of fuel to their engine as they've continued to go from strength to strength and compete in the National League in quite a formidable way. Due to an unbeaten nature, though, of Eastleigh, I'm going to go with a 4-all draw, a bit of a wild one for the joint top goal scorers of the league, Boreham Wood. Boston United versus Scunthorpe United, and the rivalry is rekindled. There's a bit of needle between these two. If you cast your mind back to 2 seasons ago now, it was the National League North playoff final between Boston United and Scunthorpe United. I don't know if it was the final, it was certainly in the playoffs. And there was a penalty shootout, and Boston knocked out Scunthorpe to progress through to the next round, or to win it, I can't remember. But anyway, Boston ended up getting promoted. Scunthorpe had to settle for another season in the National League North. And they're both in Lincolnshire, and rivalries in this are pretty tense. Scunthorpe really have shown how fabulous they are this season. They've scored 24 goals, so joint second best. Well, technically joint third, isn't it? Best teams in terms of that regard. 11 goals conceded, which is joint third best. And they are taken on a Boston side, though, which are unbeaten in the last 4. They've only lost once in the last 6. A lot of draws in there, admittedly, but I think Boston could get a draw in this one and be another painful time for Scunthorpe. A 1-all draw. Brackley Town versus Gateshead. Gateshead, I could really not place my finger on. Generally, they've scored 22 goals, which is flipping awesome for where they are, but conceded 32. Realistically, with that level of conceding, they would be the second worst team after Morecambe, obviously, in terms of in the league for conceding goals. So they really should, on that basis, be in relegation zone. But their goal scoring attributes have firepowered them to probably what would, if they didn't concede as many goals, it would be a feasible playoff side. It's an odd one. It certainly is. I think Brackley don't score a lot, but they are actually one of the more defensively savvy base teams. I know they've lost the last 3, but I think Brackley break their unbeaten or their losing streak and win this one 1-0 at St James's Park. Unfortunately, Gateshead will not be playing at the St James's Park, but they would probably like to at some point, especially seeing their ground is currently hosting Newcastle United's lady teams, who I'm sure would also want to be playing at St James's Park more. Morecambe versus Southend United. We've got the Shrimpers versus the Shrimps. I'll let you decide which one's which. I had to Google if there was any difference, and it turns out there was. Southend United are on goal difference outside the playoffs. They've been a decent enough side of late, up against the Morecambe side, which we all know and have covered extensively the troubles that Morecambe have had, and thankfully got new owners and new manager now. But it is still not plain sailing, to say the least. I think we could see a 1-all draw here. I think Morecambe could scrap one out. We'll do that. It's not the goal scoring per se, which is the issue at Morecambe. It's just they can't stop conceding. Rochdale versus Yeovil Town. Rochdale, top of the league. Not drawn a game yet. Lost twice, but have won 10 games. They play 2 less as well than both Forest Green Rovers and Carlisle. They are looking well on the ball to getting automatic promotion and title and a return to the English Football League. Up against the Yeovil side, which, yes, have been decent of less late. They did lose the last game, but before that had 3 wins on the spin. I think Yeovil are a bit of an uncertain side. They conceded 20 and scored 17. So they are a decent side on their day. It depends which one turns up. And I'm just going to have to back Rochdale for this one. 4-0 to the Northern side. We all want to see the Northerners beat out the Southerners anyway. Truro City versus SC Halifax Town. Halifax have been great. They've won the last 5 games in a row. They are truly incredible. Now, they do concede a lot. They've conceded 21 goals, but they've scored 22 and have managed to find a way to win games, even though they concede a lot. It's a bit like the old Leeds United approach that they used to have, which somehow did incredibly well. But I think Truro could just, this is bizarre. I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw. I just think it's a hard place to go, Truro. I've been saying it for a long time. I'm just waiting for it to actually come true. But I think they could, in this one, get a point out of it. York City versus Wealdstone. Wealdstone, actually, let's give them a bit of credit here. They've scored 20, conceded 18. Okay, that's quite a lot. But, you know, they're knocking on the door of the playoffs, 3 points off it. I think York will probably take the spoils in this one, in all reality, because I think they are a better team. But, you know, there's not much separating, only the 3 points which are separating these two teams. But let's just take a moment. York have got 2 games in hand on Forest Green Rovers and Carlisle, 1 game in hand over the rest of the teams in playoffs. You know, I think we could, if they win them couple, they're going to. The position of 7th is almost a bit false at the moment, and I think they do win this one 3-0 to the Minstermen. I know Wealdstone have been decent of late, unbeaten in the last 4, a lot of draws in there, and they can't seem to get a win for love nor money. They did get a win, I mean, a couple of games ago, but before that, it's been a while. Carlisle United versus Forest Green Rovers. The reason I put the National League as a thumbnail is because of this exciting little game that we have. 2nd versus 3rd. Will it be a draw? I don't think so. I think there will be a winner in this one, and I am going to say it's going to be Forest Green Rovers. 2-0 for the Gloucestershire-based side. It will be... I think Rochdale are just happy that this game is happening, because it means that at least one of the 2 sides will be dropping points. Or they both drop points. And as long as Rochdale win their game, it's not too much of an issue and creates a bit of gap and a bit of a breathing space. But you don't want to be thinking about that too early on of the season. We're still only not even a third of the way through the season, I think, at the moment. Sutton United are playing Hartlepool United at home. I think Hartlepool win this. I know they had a disappointing midweek, getting knocked out of the FA Cup to Gainsborough, I want to say. Sutton managed to avoid that upset on the replay, but they did have to take it quite a way against Farnham Town, which were in a few levels below them. I think Hartlepool put the distress behind them and win this one 2-1. AFC Telford United versus Scarborough Athletic. We are going to go with a cheeky 1-1 draw in this one. I mean, Scarborough are doing really, really well. They've only lost once all season, have been very good defensively, 2nd best defensive team in the league. They're also not too bad offensively. They're certainly in the top 5 for goals scored. I don't know. This is one of the ones that could be a wacky prediction, a 1-1 draw between the 2 of these, because Telford is just above relegation zone, has lost the last 3. It makes 0 sense, but sometimes games like that happen. Buxton versus Chorley. I think there's not too much separating these 2 teams. I don't. Yes, there's 6 points, but Buxton have got a game in hand, and I just see the side from Derbyshire edging out Chorley in this one. A 1-0 win for the Bucks. I just want my Derbyshire teams to win. That's all there is to it, really. Chester versus Kidderminster Harriers. Kidderminster Harriers have lost the last couple of games in the league, and Chester have drawn the last 4 in a row. I think they're going to go for a record, for the longest amount of time without getting a win. or losing and just getting a draw. We're going with another 1-1 draw in this one. Why ever not for both of these slightly fallen giants? Kings Lynn Town versus AFC Fylde. Kings Lynn very mid-table at the moment. You couldn't really place where they are. Fylde quite predictably in the top 3. I think out of all the people in the top 3, they've scored the second most goals in the league at the moment. Conceding-wise, a little bit of a concern, but I do think Fylde take away the win here. 1-0 to AFC Fylde. Slender win, but enough to get them some points, all 3 points on the board. Leamington versus Darlington. Leamington in 16th, haven't had a win in the last 4 games. Darlington aren't convincing either. They're in 18th. There's 2 points which are separating these two, and I think Leamington get the win at home. 2-1 to the Breakers. Macclesfield versus Curzon Ashton. Macclesfield haven't won in the last 4 games. They're proving a bit like Wrexham, that there's a certain level that they'll be able to get to, and they will be shown that they can't just tromp into this league and get a win every single week. Curzon Ashton has won the last couple of games. I think this will be a tense 2-2 draw. Oxford City versus Southport. Oxford City are in the relegation zone. It's unfortunately wasn't too surprising to see that. Well, to me, but Southport is also bottom of the league, which was a bit more of a surprise. But again, they've been going on a downhill trajectory over the last few years. I think we're going to see a draw. I can't pick a winner. They're both equally as bad as each other. 1-1 draw. Peterborough Sports versus Alfreton Town. Both of these teams I'm relegation zone. I saw today that Jake Buxton has been appointed the manager of Alfreton Town. I wish him the best. A proper Derby legend in all senses of the word. Absolutely loved him as a player. I think he was a real decent chap. He was the recent transition coach or something like that for Derby County, which connected academy players to the first team. Had a brief spell as manager at Burton. Didn't go as well as I think a lot of people think. And I think it started all right, but it didn't end in the nicest way. This is a chance to reset, but I think maybe Peterborough win this one. 3-1 to Peterborough Sports. I can't see them just staying in relegation zone this whole season, how well they did last season. Radcliffe versus Bedford Town. I think we could see a shock 0-0 draw. We know Radcliffe are the best scorers in the league. They've got scored 27. They've won 4 in a row. They should be winning this one. And I do think Bedford could just be one of the teams that they just don't beat. South Shields versus Hereford. South Shields are unbeaten, not in the entirety of the season. In all opening 10 games, they have not lost a game. And I think, predictably, unbeaten in the last 5 at Hereford, and they may come and take the first crown from South Shields. A 1-0 win. It won't be comprehensive by any means, but I think Hereford win by 1-0. Spennymoor Town versus Merthyr Town. Spennymoor also unbeaten in the last 4, but Merthyr have been a decent side of late as well. Have slightly fallen off a bit. We'll go with a 0-0 draw here. Both of these teams, realistically, aren't teams who will probably be in the playoffs coming into the season. I don't know about Spennymoor. They've been knocking on the door. Maybe this is their time that they're going to sneak into it and get 7th place or something like that. Worksop Town versus Marine. Worksop have been decent since their first season. They've been mid-table, about where you'd expect. Marine have also been a bit mid-table this season. We'll go with 1-0 Marine. It could really go either way. It could go 1-0 Worksop. It could go draw. On to National League South. AFC Toton versus Hemel Hempstead Town. Hemel Hempstead unbeaten in the last 5. They've had a revolutionary turnaround in 6th place. AFC Toton somehow in 5th place. That was a bit of a shock to me. I'm going to go Hemel Hempstead to win this one 4-1 to the Tudors, which is a bit of a surprising result. but I think just have an inkling that it will happen. Chelmsford City versus Worthing. Chelmsford are 1 point off the playoffs, but in reality, they just don't score enough goals to ever be able to compete at the moment. Only scoring 10 goals this season is just not good enough. Worthing can score, they just can't win as much. They're also equally as mid-table. There is 3 points separating these two teams. I think Worthing win this one. 2-1 to Worthing. Chesham United versus Torquay United. Chesham in mid-table in 11th. They will probably rise a couple of places at the moment, judging on how good defensively they are. If they can score a couple more, they'll be sound. However, I think Torquay, unbeaten in the last 5, there is an expectation at Torquay that they will win the title, and I think they may win this game. 3-2 to Torquay United. I think it'll be an end-to-end game, a very nice game to watch for the neutral, but not comprehensive win for either, or comprehensive loss. Chippenham Town versus Dover Athletic. Dover have, let's face it, done very well this season, but they have not won in the last 4 games, but 3 draws as part of that. Chippenham, they've previously been a very mid-table side and have fallen off a bit of a cliff in this one. Maybe the White Cliffs of Dover. That was a horrendous joke, and I do unreservedly apologise. Chippenham Town, I think, could win at home, though. I think it's going to be a bit of an interesting one. We're going to go with a 2-1 win for the Wiltshire-based side. It's a mad call, I know, but this is why you watch it, isn't it? To laugh at me doing mad predictions. Dagenham and Redbridge versus Enfield Town. Both of these teams are phenomenally poor. I actually would say, considering where Dagenham and Redbridge were over the last few seasons, that they have been the worst side in the National League South this season, in my opinion. Conceding 19, which is the second highest amount of goals conceded in the league, scoring 10, which admittedly is better than a fair few in their current position. It's not good. They've only won once, and I'm just going to have to say Dagenham and Redbridge are going to win this one because both of these teams quite poor overall. 4-0 to Dagenham and Redbridge, which would be maybe a turning point this season. You never know. But I've backed Dagenham and Redbridge a lot recently and have been proven fundamentally wrong, haven't I? So, Esley United, mid-table, they're recovering a bit from their shocker of the last season, how poor they were throughout most of it, versus Dorking Wanderers, which are 1 point off the playoffs. You would probably expect them to get it, although at the moment I'm not too sure. I'm going to go with a 1-0 win to Dorking. Farnborough versus Maidstone United. Maidstone quite mid-table, and I think things will get worse before they get better at Maidstone at the moment, basing on some of their lack of scoring ability, only scoring 10, which we've just established is the same amount of goals as somebody in the relegation zone has scored. Conceding 13, which isn't too bad, but I just aren't convinced as much about them. Farnborough, though, they are in 19th. You would expect Mason to be able to beat them, but I just don't see it happening that way. I'm going with a 2-2 draw. Hampton and Richmond Borough somehow in the playoffs. I did not expect that to happen. What I didn't also expect to happen was Weston-super-Mare to be second. They did lose their last game, but before that, had won 5 games at a bounce. We're going to go with a 0-0 draw here because in the last 4 games, 3 of them have been draws for Hampton and Richmond Borough. A proper draw feast in this video, isn't there? Hornchurch currently top of the league. They have not lost a single game in their opening 11 ties in the National League South. And they're taking on Bath City, who, let's face it, they've only won twice. They're not very good. They're not being as bad as some of the ones, but they are very poor in terms of front of goal. We go with 0-0 draw, though. I think, again, you do occasionally get upsets that happen, and me trying to predict them is a difficult one. I'm attending Worksop Town versus Marine. Enjoy. I've seen both of them teams at various stages of my life. Marine very recently, Worksop in the past. I think Worksop have been, for me, the more entertaining team to watch as a neutral, but you just heard what I was going to predict as a score. Maidenhead United versus Eastbourne Borough. Yeah, so Maidenhead are flying. They have won the last 6 games on a bounce. They had a horrendous start to the season, really struggling, and have since just cocooned into a new butterfly, or magpie maybe, and fluttering off and looking really, really strong. Definitely looking a playoff contender at the moment. Maybe could do even better. Eastbourne have been the surprise package for me this season in terms of how bad they've been. They're the only team, well, they're one of 2 teams alongside Salisbury to have not won a single game. They've got the joint second lowest amount of goals scored at 6. They're not very good at the moment, and I'm going to go with a 2-1 win to Maidenhead at York Road. It's just not too surprising to say. Salisbury versus Slough Town. I think if Salisbury want any hope of staying up, this has to be their first win of the season. In the opening 10 games, they haven't won a game in the league. And up against the Slough Town, Slough are in 17th, so they should be winning this one, Salisbury, if they had any hope of staying up. And I think they will. 1-0 to Salisbury at home. Tonbridge Angels versus Horsham. Tonbridge Angels have won the last 3 games on the bounce. Horsham haven't won in the last 3 games. I think we could see another win added to Tonbridge Angels. They are gradually getting together a bit of form. 2-0 to Tonbridge Angels. Tottenham Hotspur versus Aston Villa onto the Sunday games. Tottenham have done really well at the start of this season, considering how bad they were last season. Thomas Frank has done a revolutionary job. Now, Aston Villa started the season poorly, but in the last 4 games have looked decent. I just think Tottenham will edge this one out and win by a comprehensive 4-1. Liverpool versus Manchester United. Liverpool have lost the last couple, maybe have lost their mojo, but against Manchester United, who, let's say this game would have traditionally been who is the best team in England, and is a proper rivalry between Manchester and Liverpool, which extends back for years. Manchester United are not the team that they used to be. I am going to say it's going to be a 2-2 draw, because this game always ends in a draw, but even so. West Ham United versus Brentford. West Ham are struggling at the moment, and as are Brentford, but not as much. I think Brentford have also got a better chance of recovering. Yeah, Brentford to win this one 1-0. On to some Champions League games. We've got Arsenal versus Atletico Madrid. We're going to go with a 1-1 draw in the Champions League occasion. Arsenal have won the last couple of games in the Champions League. Atletico Madrid are a bit more 50-50. Yeah, I mean, Arsenal do have a bottle in them, don't they? Newcastle United versus Benfica. Newcastle United, a bit 50-50. Lost their opening game, but won their last one. Admittedly, the last one was against Union St. Galois, which was a bit of an easier game. They're up against Benfica, though, which are a difficult side normally to beat. However, they have lost their opening 2. We'll go with a 1-1 draw at St. James's Park. Villarreal versus Manchester City. You'd be a fool not to back Manchester City to win this one, and I am no fool. 3-0 to Manchester City versus Villarreal, who have yet to win in this competition. On to the Championship. We're going to rattle through these now. Blackburn Rovers versus Sheffield United. As I said already, Sheffield United, I think, are going to start clocking back into some good form, and they're up against a Blackburn team who are looking disappointingly average at best, awful at worst. 2-0 to Sheffield United. Derby County versus Norwich City. Derby need to win this game. I just don't think we will. 3-2 to Norwich City. Really would like to see us win at home, though, to Norwich. We've got easier games, and we should be winning these ones, by the way. Hull City versus Leicester City. We'll go with an unlikely 2-2 draw. We love a bit of a surprise package. In the Championship, anything can happen. Ipswich Town versus Charlton Athletic. As I've already mentioned, I think Ipswich are going to go from strength to strength now and just carry on charging the table. 6-0 at Portman Road to Ipswich Town. Millwall versus Stoke City at the Den. I think both of these teams are very decent. I think Stoke aren't probably going to be able to hold that as long as Millwall. 1-0 to Millwall. Portsmouth versus Coventry City. I think Coventry's bubble can burst in the most unexpected way here at Fratton Park. We know Portsmouth can provide a bit of an upset. 4-1 to Pompey. Maybe that will be what is needed to suddenly start making Coventry not seem as invincible as they currently are. Preston North End versus Birmingham City. We know Preston have been doing decent at the start of this season. 2-1 win against Birmingham. Bristol City versus Southampton. Gotta say, Bristol City, they are doing quite well. I think they might get playoffs coming into the season. And Southampton have been a bit poor at the start of the season. 3-1 for Robins. Reading versus Northampton Town. I think this is a Reading win, a comprehensive Reading win at that 4-1 to the Berkshire base side, and pushed them outside that relegation zone. Swindon Town versus Notts County, a very interesting and fantastically exciting game for the neutral, with Notts County likely to put on a show. Swindon, I just don't see staying up there in the top 3 all season. 2-1 to Notts County. Boston United versus Morecambe. I think fairly obviously I'm going to have to back Boston to win this one. 2-1 to the Pilgrims. Eastleigh versus Scunthorpe United. I don't think Scunthorpe will be able to maintain a playoff push every single week. I don't think they're going to be. They're not going to be as good as. So they've got a bit egotistic of late. Some of the fans, anyway, getting a bit carried away. 2-0 to Eastleigh. It may bring Scunthorpe a bit down to earth. York City versus Boreham Wood. Again, a great game to watch from neutrals. Both of these teams currently in the playoff positions. Both have got aspirations of finishing there, I'm sure. 2-2 draw. Barnsley versus Manchester United's under-21s in the EFL Trophy. I think Manchester United under-21s win this one 3-2. Stevenage versus Crystal Palace's under-21s. I think Crystal Palace's under-21s, some of them will be rested for the Conference League. And I think Stevenage win this one 1-0 at home, which I think that means they've won every single game in there. Yes, will mean that they've won every single one. I mean, it's a pretty dead rubber nothing game in all likelihood because, Stevenage have already qualified at this point, and Palace will need to win in order to qualify and hope that Bromley drawing at the extra point on penalties or something like that. Barnet versus Cambridge United. Cambridge are still top of the table. They've only played once. So they could, and this is Barnet's last game. Barnet would need to win this one and then hope Luton lose against Brighton Hove under-21s. I'm going to 3-1 to Barnet, which does then make that a somewhat likely, a possible scenario. But yeah, it's an odd one. On to rattling through these nationally north ones. Alfreton Town versus Chester. We're going to go with a 2-2 draw here. I think Jake Buxton will gradually start putting this team back together. He used to play for Alfreton on loan at one point. And Chester have drawn a ton of games of late. And I think Alfreton will just continue that drawing momentum. Bedford Town versus Oxford City. I think this is a relegation 6-pointer at the moment. And I think Oxford City come away with a win. 2-1 to Oxford City. A little bit of experience at this level maybe is what needed. Hereford versus AFC Telford United. A bit of West Midlands rivalry. I don't know. They're not that close, but somewhat. A 0-0 draw. in this one. Leamington versus Macclesfield. Macclesfield, as I was saying earlier, aren't as much as they bigged up themselves to be. I think Leamington could drag out a 0-0 draw at home in this one. Merthyr Town versus Kidderminster Harriers. Kidderminster, I just think, will reach the playoffs. I mean, it's just almost an inevitability at this point. 1-0 to Kidderminster Harriers. Peterborough Sports versus Buxton. I think Sports start rising up the table a bit at this moment in time. I think they had a poor start to the season. I don't think it'll continue. 1-0 to Peterborough Sports. That means that they would have beaten both Derbyshire teams. So that's absolutely horrendous for me to predict that, isn't it? Radcliffe versus Darlington. I think Darlow could provide a bit of an upset. I think Radcliffe aren't going to be able to maintain a playoff push throughout the whole season. Although at the moment it looks like it, it just feels like the stature of their club isn't quite matching up with me. 4-1 to Darlington. South Shields versus Scarborough Athletic, maybe a title decider already. Okay, probably not. But it's going to be an even game nevertheless. I think it will be a 1-1 draw. I'd love to see South Shields get promoted to the National League. I absolutely would. Because they are a side that I've been to a few times. Always welcoming, always a good, well support. Great ground. They've had a lot of improvements over the last few years. And I just love it. I just love that ground. Southport versus Chorley in a bit of a South Lancashire derby. 0-0 draw. I think Southport will have taken some confidence from maybe that draw in the last game and take that into this one. It's a local rivalry as well, so it does mean a bit of a tension into it. Spennymoor Town versus AFC Fylde. We'll go with Spennymoor win. I want Spennymoor to reach the playoffs this season. I'd love to see the northern teams just do as well as possible, as well as these northeast ones, that is, because I now live in the northeast. So the higher level they are, the more attractive games I can go and see. 2-1 to Spennymoor Town. Worksop Town versus Kings Lynn Town. I think this will be a 1-1 draw. Neither of these are flying per se, but none of them are horrendous either. Bath City versus AFC Toten. I think we could see a bit of a shock with Bath winning this one. 3-2 to Bath City, which will be another disappointing defeat for Toten. Chesham United versus Worthing. We'll go with a Chesham win, 2-0. Dagenham and Redbridge versus Horsham. A 0-0 draw in this one. Horsham have drawn a fair bit recently, and I don't think Dagenham and Redbridge will be in relegation zone. They used to be in the Football League. They used to be that team that you chose in FIFA to get from zero to hero. So I'm not entirely sure how this is happening. Dover Athletic versus Dorking Wanderers. A 0-0 draw in this one as well. This is 8th versus 9th, so I can't really split the two. Enfield Town versus Ebbsfleet. A fairly easy win, I think, for Ebbsfleet. I know they've not won in a long time, but yeah, 2-0 to Ebbsfleet. Hampton and Richmond Borough versus Hemel Hempstead Town. 6th versus 7th. I just think Hemel Hempstead are much more likely to stay in the playoffs than Hampton and Richmond Borough at present. If they can start scoring goals, Hemel Hempstead, which I believe they could, then they certainly have that defence nailed down to a T. 2-1 to Hemel Hempstead Town. Maidenhead United versus Tunbridge Angels. We'll go with a 0-0 draw. The winning run for Maidenhead to come to an end. But Tunbridge Angels are also on that fine run of form. So I just think that both teams' unbeaten runs do continue. Maidstone United versus Eastbourne Borough. Eastbourne are in the mud at the moment. So, yeah, Maidstone 3, Eastbourne 1. Salisbury v Farnborough. Both of these teams, I think, may be in trouble. 0-0 draw. Torquay versus Chippenham. Fairly easy win for Torquay here. 3-0 to the Devon-based side. Weston-super-Mare versus Slough Town. If Western have any aspirations for the title, they need to be winning this type of game, and I think they will. 2-0. Chelsea versus Ajax in the Champions League. We'll go with a dramatic 4-all draw at Stamford Bridge. A bit of a wild one. We'll love to see it. Eintracht Frankfurt versus Liverpool. We'll go with a 0-0 draw in Germany. Monaco versus Tottenham Hotspur. It's such a Spurs thing to lose this one, having done so well this start of the season. And I'm going to have to say that it's going to happen. Spursy is an adjective for a reason. 2-1 to Monaco. Swansea City versus Queen's Park Rangers. Both of these may have outside aspirations for the playoffs, but don't think we'll make it in the end. 3-0 to Swansea City at Liberty Stadium. Watford versus West Bromwich Albion. I think at home at Vicarage Lane, we may see Xavi Garcia manage to put some things into place at this point and win this one. 2-1. Wrexham versus Oxford United. I think Wrexham are going to struggle actually this season. I really do. I think they could end up getting in a relegation battle. 2-1 to Oxford United. Sheffield Wednesday versus Middlesbrough in a Yorkshire derby. And because it's derby day and at home, we're going to back Sheffield Wednesday for a 2-1 win. Go Ahead Eagles versus Aston Villa. I'm going to go with a 0-0. Couldn't really... I think a lot of people probably have Villa to win that one, but I think, Dutch sides will probably provide a bit of an upset as well. Porto are travelling to Forest. We'll go with a 0-0 draw in that one because I don't think at the moment Forest are in a good place. Crystal Palace versus AEK Larnaca. Another 0-0 draw. Why not? I don't expect Palace to win every game, and it could be a bit of an upset. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you are new around here. I'm going to go and enjoy my weekend, and I hope you equally have a good one. But it's goodbye, hello, and goodbye again. Goodbye for now.